I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
I love it when a young traveler comes home from a trip and reports to me the kind of magic they experienced and the same kind of magic I experienced on the Hippie Trail. And they did something that's not iconic. It's not the Camino or something like that everybody's doing. They just made their own Hippie Trail in a part of the world they were curious about. They didn't have the safety net. They didn't have a lot of money. They became temporary locals. They got out of their comfort zone, and it was a transformational experience.
Get ready for an absolutely unique and incredible episode today. In fact, this is my dream episode in many ways. I'll tell you why in a moment. That was, of course, Rick Steves, the travel legend. His work has had a huge influence on me, both as a young traveler on the ground, backpacking through Europe, and later as a budding professional podcaster with dreams of creating something, anything that could in some way help people achieve their travel dreams. And for over 4 decades, that's exactly what Rick has been doing through his work. He's been at the forefront of the travel industry, helping millions of people see the world through his best-selling guidebook series, his popular public television show, his public radio show, his travel columns, his group tour company, which takes 30,000 travelers to Europe annually, and of course through the free travel information he offers on his website, ricksteves.com. And he's got a new book. It's called On the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer. And what makes this book so unique is that Rick was 23 years old when he set off on July 14th, 1978, to go on the adventure of a lifetime on the legendary Hippie Trail. And he kept a journal and decided to essentially publish that journal from 23-year-old Rick Steves, pretty much edit free. And it's really a glimpse into not only what it was like on the Hippie Trail, but where Rick was at that time in his life. And it's pretty bold. I mean, I can't imagine publishing one of my journals. And I think that it just is a testament to Rick and how open and honest and transparent he is and has always been with his work and sharing his perspective. And I thought, as a fan, what conversation do I want to hear? I wanted to hear 2 of my favorite authors, 2 incredible travel writers, have this chat. So I asked Eric Weiner to be a guest host for this show. He's an award-winning journalist, a New York Times bestselling author, a speaker. His books include The Geography of Bliss, The Geography of Genius, Man Seeks God, his most recent book, Ben and Me. We had him on the show for that. And a lot of people don't know that Eric is a former foreign correspondent for NPR and reporter for the New York Times. So he's got mad interviewing skills. And he's also spent a lot of time in India and other places on the Hippie Trail. And I thought, wow, do I get to be a fly on the wall here, put these 2 together, and just hear them have an incredible conversation about writing, about travel, about what it means to take a transformative trip like this, overland on the Hippie Trail. And that's what you're going to hear today. You're going to hear the episode that I wanted to hear as a super fan of both Eric and Rick, and we're going to get into it right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. Couldn't be more excited for this one. You're about to hear an epic conversation. I should have mentioned at the top Eric's website as well, ericweinerbooks.com. We'll link up to that so you can learn more about him, and of course ricksteves.com for all of Rick's stuff. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, zerototravel.com/newsletter is where you can get our free newsletter. It goes out once a week. And again, it is free, so please join the community over there to get some more travel goodies. Now, without further ado, let's dive in to this episode, a conversation with Eric Weiner and Rick Steves. Stick around on the back end. I will leave you with a couple quotes to send you off from these two awesome individuals, and enjoy their chat. I'll see you on the other side. Cheers.
Rick Steves, it's great to talk to you again. Usually you're the one interviewing me, but now the microphones have turned, so to speak, and I'm interviewing you, which is kind of cool.
I love that. I'm happy to be with you, Eric. Thanks.
Yeah. So this was just a delight on the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu, and the making of a travel writer. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I learned a few things about you. Let's time travel back to 1978 in our Wayback Machine. First of all, you look a bit different today than you did back then. Did anyone ever tell you that in 1978 you bore a very close resemblance to Shaggy from Scooby-Doo?
Ah, no.
Because you really look like Shaggy.
Oh, I was Shaggy, that's for sure.
You were Shaggy. So
a lot of people say I look like, what's his name on the Grateful Dead, John Lesh?
Yeah, that's possible too.
Yeah, but Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Okay.
Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
I just look like Shaggy. Yeah, that was pretty Shaggy.
You are not Rick Steves, travel writer and travel guide. You are a piano teacher. I did not know that about you, but I guess it makes sense because your father was a band leader and a piano technician, I take it. Do you ever think that had you not taken this journey from, I believe, Frankfurt all the way to India and Kathmandu, you might still be a piano teacher?
I do think about that because I really wanted to be a piano teacher. I loved being a piano teacher. You know, it's a part of your community. I loved working with the kids. I love music. My girlfriend was a piano teacher. We were going to get married and move our grand pianos together. You know how grand pianos can kind of nestle together. And we'd have a kind of a reasonable livelihood and be able to travel every summer, and it would have been great. But then slowly after this trip, I became more involved in teaching travel, and I ended up turning my recital hall, which I had, where I taught a studio, and I turned it into a lecture hall, and I became a travel teacher.
So clearly it was an inflection point in your life, to put it mildly. But it almost didn't happen, it seems. It's 1978, and the Hippie Trail is beckoning. This is the overland journey beginning in Europe, going through countries like Turkey and Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you write about how you're hesitating and you're buying tickets, canceling the tickets. Was there something that tipped the scale in favor of, you know what, I'm 23, I'm going to do this? Was it your friend Gene who was saying, Rick, come on? Or what finally made you decide to do it?
I sold him on the idea, and I would always whisper in his ear, Gene, let's go east. Go east, young man. East, young man. So this book is it came from the 60,000 word journal that I wrote when I was 23 years old, 2 years before I really was a travel writer. When I wrote this, it was for me. I didn't write it for anybody else. I was a piano teacher. I'm happy to be a piano teacher, travel in the summer. And 2 years later, I wrote Europe Through the Back Door. And from that point on, my travels were to help me be a better travel teacher. But the cool thing about this trip that I learned when I read it 40 years after I wrote it, I had forgotten about it almost. I mean, it was just in a box for 40 years. This was a report, a candid, intimate report on travel, purely for the sake of travel. I wasn't researching a book or scouting for a TV show or anything like that.
You wrote for yourself. You call it an anthropological dig into my own past, which I love. And you just, during the pandemic, stumbled across these boxes I'm impressed with two things. That one is that you kept a journal, 1,000 words a day. That's twice what Hemingway did, by the way. And that you can still read your handwriting 42 years later. Mine, it has a shelf life of about 48 hours, beyond which it's indecipherable.
I know what you mean. And when I write my notes now in my research, it looks like, I think Leonardo da Vinci wrote backwards and inside out or something, so nobody could read it. I feel like I write in my own weird little handwriting that nobody can read it. I can read it for 48 hours and then I forget. But back then I had beautiful penmanship, and this is small print, and it was no lines on the book, and it really is quite legible. And I don't know, that was just a different me.
Yeah. But the motivation for keeping the journal was for yourself to record the feeling, to memorialize the trip, to have something to turn back to.
You know, Eric, I don't know, but every summer I bought it. It was a ritual for me. I bought a hardback empty book. And I remember thinking, a lot of people write a journal in a steno pad, you know. And I wanted to write, you know, those little spiral throwaway books. I wanted a book that would be with me for the rest of my life. Life never slowed down enough until the pandemic where I could actually read it 40 years later. But I bought every year one of these 200-page empty books, and I would fill it up. And I've got 7 or 8 of those for 7 or 8 years of travel. And then when I started writing guidebooks, I no longer had the bandwidth to do a journal, and all of my writing energy would share over. But I think, as the subtitle of the book goes, Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer, this was clearly, when you read it, and you're a travel writer, this was the work of a travel writer in training who didn't even know what was ahead of him.
And when you unearth these pages, these notebooks, and you read them, now you're reading words from your 23-year-old self. Did you recognize that self, or did you feel like you were reading the words of a stranger?
To be honest, I forgot a lot of the details. So when I read it, it kindled those memories. It was me without the worldview that I have now. It was me not with no political, economic justice kind of concerns at all. I was just over there. Wow, they're skinning a goat. That's cool. Wow, they're selling marijuana in the market, just like pesto or basil or whatever.
Terms like ethnocentrism, cultural appropriation meant nothing to you.
In fact, I go back, Eric. I go back to some of these cities later, like Hebron in Palestine. That's where you have the tomb of Abraham, and Muslims and Jews worship at the same tomb with bulletproof glass between them. You know, and now I go there and I go, wow, there's bulletproof glass. There's Jews here and Muslims there. And this is 4,000 years of heritage. I was in Hebron when I was 23, and I had no clue the importance of the city for Muslims and Jews. I just was on a cultural scavenger hunt having fun.
I mean, it seems that you were looking at the world through what the Buddhists call beginner's mind. You know,
exactly. That's exactly what I was doing.
So you want to get from Frankfurt to Kathmandu by way of India. And even back in 1978, I believe they had airplanes. You know, you could have flown, and you remark about that a couple of times. Gee, we could have flown. If India, we'll get into this, but India is sort of the promised land for you. That's where your heart is. Why not fly?
You got to earn the trip. You can't just fly into it and have that magic. I don't think. I've interviewed Paul Theroux, and he's a big, firm believer in crossing borders instead of flying from capital to capital. And I agree with that very much. And for me, when Gene and I would open up the map, we had a map that was sold for Hippie Trail travelers that takes you from Istanbul to Kathmandu. And you open it up, it's this big, long map. And I measured the distance from here to Kathmandu by how many borders do we still have to cross. Borders were hurdles, and they were scary, and you didn't know what was next. And every time we crossed a border, we were farther away from comfort, meaning Europe, and closer to our Shangri-La, you know, Kathmandu in Nepal. There was not much information. That's really a striking thing. And it was really like going behind the dark side of the moon with a bunch of other backpackers.
We should point out there's no TripAdvisor. There's no Lonely Planet even at this point. You're just out there. And trains are romantic. They can be. Buses a lot less so. And you spend a lot of time, days upon days on buses. You take one gonzo ride through, I think, Turkey with the driver you call the pirate. You've got seats that don't recline. You've got other passengers' knees in your kidneys. You even get into a fender bender or a bit of an accident at one point. Were you forever put off from buses after this trip? Because it sounds awful.
Well, it sounds awful in the moment, but in retrospect, it was great. There's in Turkey they call a minibus public transportation service a dolmuş, and that's the Turkish word for smashed, and everybody is smashed into this bus, and we were that way. Buses were crazy. You throw your stuff up on the roof, and you're just at the mercy of the driver when you're going to have a rest stop or whatever. And it was an odyssey, and there was no other way to do it.
You were human hummus aboard the bus, basically.
Human hummus. That's great. The cover of the book has this beat up little bus packed with people and just many people on the roof.
Where was that taken, by the way, that picture on the cover?
That's at the border of Afghanistan, Iran and Afghanistan. Bus travel was, well, you just ad-libbed it. I mean, if you don't, we took a couple of planes in India, but generally there were no train connections until we got to Pakistan. And then it was an old steam train, which is a great experience. But for me, it was buses. And, that's how you get around in Turkey. It's just, you got all these cities. Every city's got a vacant lot with buses. They go when they fill up. They're cheap, and there's no schedule you can rely on.
You had some close calls. You were in an accident in Turkey. During this whole journey, did you ever fear for your life at any moment?
2 times I had a dangerous thing. We were sleeping on a train we thought was just parked for the night in Belgrade, in what was Yugoslavia. And it was a free night's sleep. And suddenly it jerked into motion and we were going somewhere. And I remember we grabbed up all our stuff and we slowed down at the first suburban station or town outside of the big city. We threw our bags onto the platform and then we jumped out of the train. And we did that and we both tumbled onto the platform and we realized that was really stupid. We could have hit a pillar and been thrown back onto the bus and been killed easily. But we survived that. And that was just a reminder that, we got to be careful. And then in India, I was so euphoric when I was on an elephant, just doing a little ride on an elephant, that I was hanging my legs over the side. It seems like a silly thing. I was riding side saddle kind of. And the elephant came into the concrete landing pier. And I didn't think to get my feet out of the way until a second before that elephant crashed into that concrete pier. And had I been taking a picture or just having a brain lapse, I would have lost my legs there. And that just reminded me, we are in the wilds. There's no great hospital down the street. I got to be careful.
True. I mean, I think something that's true for travel writing is that bad choices and bad journeys make for good stories. And that the travel writer's worst nightmare is a luxurious trip where everything goes as planned.
Amen. That is so true. The more you spend, the more you get yourself out of the fray, and you've got to have yourself in a world where things can go wrong, but you don't want to be foolish and risk taking, and where serendipity presents itself. If you're too careful, you don't have serendipity. So you want to travel with the option of serendipity, and then when serendipity knocks on your door, you got to say yes.
You got to open that door. So let's talk flea bag hotels, of which you stayed in quite a few. You got to know cockroaches fairly intimately, it seems. I love the story of in Turkey, you're at a flea bag hotel in quotes, and you complain about the dirty sheets, and they turn them over as the solution.
I don't know if he had a bad attitude about rich American travelers coming through, or if that's really what he thought would be helping us out. But we realized there's a different standard here. That was a hotel with no locks on the doors, with dirt floors, with windows that were basically window sills or window frames that didn't have anything in them, and that's where you slept for the night. And it was $1 a night in a place like that. And you didn't have what you would expect in a hotel.
And then occasionally you would get fed up and you would splurge $5, even $10 a night. And it seems you're engaging in what I call intermittent luxury. The idea being that if you're always traveling first class and flying first class, you don't appreciate it. But when you get the unexpected upgrade, you do appreciate it. Is that still your philosophy?
Well, on that trip, Eric, I think about halfway through, we realized, we're getting sick and we've got a few extra bucks. And for $5 instead of $1, you can actually have a safe and comfortable hotel and a refuge from all the chaos in the streets. And just for your own sanity, you need a place where you can sit by the pool and not be pestered by beggars and con artists and hustlers. And that's what a good hotel would give you.
And then you appreciate it more because you've just stayed in a lot of bad hotels, right?
Yeah. And the question about, do I resort to that now? That I was thinking, could I have this trip today? And I don't think I could, because I'm not that rugged anymore. I want to have these experiences, but I want to have a good bed at night. I want to have a safe place to leave my gear, while I'm out and about. I want that refuge. I want to shower. And that's just the consequence of being older and wealthier. But you can still get out there and get into that swirling mosh pit of cultural surprises. But I like to have the refuge. And when I travel, anywhere I travel now, I have that refuge. I mean, oftentimes it's with a TV crew, and you got to have a place where you can charge your stuff and safely leave all your gear and your shot footage and everything.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip: hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop. Now, back to the show.
You were haggling, and I could see on the page that you were struggling with, I'm getting ripped off here as a foreigner. And then at the same time, you're thinking, well, what am I doing? It's between $1 and $1.50. So you seem to go back and forth on whether you should allow yourself to be ripped off. And it seems by the end of the trip, you're saying, you know what? Let them rip me off for a few dollars.
When I read through the book, I was just in a recording studio doing the audio version of the book. And it was just fun to read on the Hippie Trail from beginning to end after it had all been finalized and written. And I noticed I did have this ongoing struggle about, should you insist on a fair local price as a matter of principle, or are you doing that to defend your budget? And when it's $2 or $3 difference, it doesn't really matter on your budget. It was a matter of principle for me. I just felt like it's correct that there's not two standards of price. But then I rethought that, and I realized, the amount of money I make in an hour of teaching piano at the time, compared to the amount of money they would make working in the fields for that time, I must be making at least 10 times as much per hour, and I was just a kid. So I thought, let them rip me off. So I wasn't so indignant about that.
So did you cringe when you reread these pages now as older Rick? Did anything make you cringe? Because you say explicitly in the beginning that you did not change these words to make yourself sound older and wiser. But you are older and wiser.
And I've been trained to be more thoughtful and sensitive in my reporting, which is just common sense, and it's maturity, and it's respect, and it's the right thing. But when I cringe, when I read it, I don't cringe, even though I was talking about things in a way you couldn't get away with today, as far as just talking about people who had physical disabilities or people who were obese,
but you chose to let the words speak for themselves. You did not.
I let the words speak for themselves because I believe that we shouldn't judge people or eras in the past by our standards today. I believe we're all evolving and becoming more thoughtful and sensitive, and that's great. But I'm not going to condemn somebody 500 years ago for a certain outlook that is considered correct today. I want to accept it in its context. And, it's a complicated issue. I don't want to get into a big debate about that.
One example is you're in Herat in Western Afghanistan. There's a picture in the book of you wearing an all-white outfit. I think it's some sort of salwar kameez, and complete with a white turban. I can see some people today saying, oh, that's cultural appropriation. Or is it cultural appreciation, which I like to make a distinction between the two?
I guess I'm old-fashioned about that. To me, it was clearly a cultural appreciation. And a lot of stuff I do, people who are more correct than me call that cultural appropriation. I've got nothing but admiration for other cultures, and I want to be a temporary local. That's kind of what I've been saying for 40 years. And I'm established enough now where I don't want to get canceled, but I don't need to toe the line in everything I do according to, you can't say that anymore, you know.
Right. And I think there is a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, because that's what I do in my books is I try to appreciate other cultures and their attitudes toward happiness or creativity.
It's very interesting that you pointed that out, because you're absolutely right. If I was more tuned into this, you know, you could condemn me for cultural appropriation by wearing that turban, but I was wearing that turban because I thought it would be more practical and smart to wear something like that to deal with
cool
the sand and the cool. Yeah. And it made total sense to me. And I thought, why am I wearing these tight Western clothes when I could really go local, and not go local just by eating and drinking what they're eating, but by wearing what they're wearing? It was fun.
No, I agree. And you get involved. You don't just observe. You seem to carry hay literally in a couple of countries, Afghanistan and India. I think it was a track by tractor in Afghanistan on your head in India. So you were willing to be a little goofy, if I may, and willing to...
It's goofy. It's almost juvenile. I'm there with my buddy. We just got out of school. We're in the middle of India or Afghanistan or somewhere, and we see 4 women walking down this country road with big bags of hay balanced on their head. It's a biblical kind of scene. Now, I don't know if I would do this today, but back then it was just like, hey, Rick, this is perfect. Go up there and help this lady out. So I went up there, and she didn't speak. I doubt if she spoke English, and I certainly didn't speak whatever she spoke, but she let me carry her hay for her. And it was just a hoot for everybody. I remember it, and I bet she remembers it too if she's still around 40 years later.
Reading these pages, it struck me that there are a lot of mood swings going on, you and your friend Jean. 1 second, you're loving it. Then in Afghanistan, you write, and I quote, "I'm glad I'm finally doing this, but I'm really looking forward to the end of it all." So were you enjoying yourself, or were you not? Because it's not clear page to page.
I don't know if I was enjoying myself or not, but I was committed to the experience, and I knew it was a rich and rewarding thing we were doing. But I was totally aware that we could have turned around and gone to the Greek Isles and enjoyed ourselves more. The Greek Isles to me were just a wonderful playground where we could hang out with other people, like young kids like us, and all sorts of fun going on the beach and in the bars after hours and so on.
So the pleasure was not the objective here. This was not a hedonistic journey.
It was not a pleasure thing at all, but I was aware, even as a 23-year-old, I was aware that this is a trip of a lifetime. This is a coming of age thing. This is going to broaden my perspective, I think, for the rest of my life. And I think it did.
Something else that struck me is you seem to be at your happiest when you were doing nothing. It's kind of nice, you write, not knowing or caring where you're going. And in Kashmir, I believe you engage in what I call premeditated indolence, and you engage in what you call intensive nothing and relaxation. So you're taking this trip that's active, you're riding buses and trains, and you're seeing things, but on the page, at least, you're at your happiest when you're just doing nothing. What's going on there?
Well, that's almost like the trip is work and the nothing is a weekend. We needed a break. And I remember sometimes we had a sense that, okay, Gene, we've got to get our sleep, we've got to eat healthy, and we've got to stay in safe places just so we can get through this odyssey. But I do remember I was aware. It's interesting because I'm more aware of things now than I was when I was just a 23-year-old kid on the road having fun. But I was aware, keenly aware back then, that I was not wearing a watch, and it was very interesting. Or no, let's put it this way. It was bad news if I had an appointment in a certain day where I had to be somewhere at a certain time. I remember in Kathmandu, we wanted to go to this concert, and all day long, we had to be at a certain hotel at a certain time to see this concert. It really put a dent in my style because I had grown used to be totally free.
And that was probably your only appointment for that week, if not that month.
Probably. And it really was, it was a heavy price to pay beyond the ticket price for that folk evening of music and dance.
So you were young, but you were still old enough to have certain expectations of certain places. And there are a couple that you say that really you had high expectations for. One was the Khyber Pass, separating Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the other, the Taj Mahal in India. And I've thought a lot about this, about how expectations are actually the enemy of happiness and not good for travel, which is why when I go to a new country, I'll read about the history, but I won't read other contemporary accounts, other travel writers, because I don't want it to mess with my fresh observations. So these two places, say the Khyber Pass and the Taj Mahal, that you thought were special, did they live up to your expectations? Did the expectations interfere with your experience them in a fresh way?
If I think of both of those, they absolutely did. The Khyber Pass, we were on one of those gaily painted trolleys almost that go winding over the mountains, and they're painted like a kaleidoscope. They're painted like something.
It's the most colorful thing within miles. Yes.
Oh, it's incredible. And we were sitting there, and I just happened to have a few sentences from the book there. I wrote, "Crossing the Khyber Pass has long been my dream, and this morning we would do it. We swallowed our malaria pills with black tea and toast and packed onto our kinky, old, brightly but badly painted bus to Pakistan. Our seats were big and high with open windows that let me lean out, except for a little smear of yesterday's vomit still dried to the outside of the bus below my window. This was exactly the way I wanted to do the Khyber Pass." And then we wound under stony little fortresses with tattered flags and tribesmen up above us looking down on the road. And now in retrospect, I feel like those were the fathers of the Taliban people in a part of the country that even back then was unrulable. This was called the unruled territories or something like that, both in Pakistan and Afghanistan.
I mean, you say you didn't know much about the world. In some cases that comes through, a kind of actually wonderful ignorance, I would say. But in other cases, you seem remarkably prescient. So you're in Afghanistan. This is 1978. You describe it as one of the friendliest countries I've experienced. That's probably not the way most people would describe it today. The Soviet Union now has not yet invaded Afghanistan. It will a year later. But you write, in 1978, my hunch is the Soviets, are underestimating the spine of this poverty-stricken nation. Boy, you nailed that one.
Yeah, that was pretty prescient. And I know, because I've looked back on history and stuff, that the war started the next year, but my memory was I saw Soviet tanks on squares sort of staking their flag, and I remember menus that had the prices cut thanks to the People's Revolution, which meant thanks to your new Soviet overlords. So there was stuff going on, but I didn't really have much of a clue except for I just thought if anybody wants to take over these people, they may not have the fanciest infrastructure and gear, but they've got steel in their eyes. And I had so many encounters with people that were so proud. That's where I met the professor in Kabul who sat with me, and you may remember the little story about. He said, "You're an American, right?" Yeah, I said, and he said, "Well, I want you to know that a third of the people on the planet eat with spoons and forks like you, a third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people with their fingers like me, and we're all civilized just the same." That was like, whoa, you got a chip on your shoulder. But that's the cool thing that you get shoved in your face is people who are proud and they're different than you are. And you realize, I didn't realize it right then, but later on in that trip, I started eating with my hands instead of spoons and forks.
And I realized, you're still civilized.
You're still civilized
in your own way. Did you in Iran? Did you see the Islamic Revolution coming?
Yeah, I did. I remember seeing pictures of the Shah, and back, anytime you got a strong man ruling, you've got his pictures everywhere. And you go to the marketplace, and there's little kiosks that sell these pictures. And for me, it was the weirdest thing. And this is another of those little accidental prescient things, maybe for a 23-year-old. But I felt like it was a metaphor for a falling dictator. Was that all of those pictures of the Shah on these cheap little frames seemed so fragile that one little tremor would send them all crashing to the ground. And sure enough, the whole Hippie Trail was not possible to do the next year. because that's when they had the Islamic Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
That is true. And I read that, and I have to say I was kind of jealous. I'm a few years younger than you, and I missed the Hippie Trail by a few years, and you barely squeaked in because 1979, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the trail is closed. I mean, do you realize how lucky you were?
I do now, because if I didn't have that experience, you never know. I mean, I might have had a different experience that would be also good, but that was, if you're a traveler, it's just hard to, there's epic trips you can do. There's a handful of them on this planet. And that was certainly one of them. Having said that, Eric, I love, as an older traveler now, kind of the, in a lot of ways, the grandpa of all these travelers and travel writers, pushing 70. I love it when a young traveler comes home from a trip and reports to me the kind of magic they experienced, and the same kind of magic I experienced on the Hippie Trail. And they did something that's not iconic. It's not the Camino or something like that everybody's doing. They just made their own Hippie Trail in a part of the world they were curious about. They didn't have the safety net. They didn't have a lot of money. They became temporary locals. They got out of their comfort zone, and it was a transformational experience.
And this is today. This is not 1978.
This is 2024.
Because I wrestle with this, Rick, to be honest, that sometimes I wish I was born 100 years earlier, like 1920s, 30s, like between the wars. That was a time to be a travel writer, when you can go and actually just explore and write about something that no one has ever seen before, outside of the locals. But I guess we live in the times.
It's interesting you say that, because there was a time when a lot of people inherited their parents' slideshows. And these were old, bad slides taken in the 1950s in Europe. And they'd say, we don't know how to do these. And I'd say, well, I'll take them. I'd love to take them. And I would spend hours looking through these. They were like a time travel experience for me to go back and see Europe through the eyes of somebody who was fortunate enough to see it back after the war.
And I'm sure 100 years from now, some travel writer would say, I wish I was traveling when Rick Steves and Eric Weiner were around. So
yeah,
there you go.
I think so too. Yep.
So let's talk about India, which was, I think, kind of the mothership for this trip. And you and I share this love of India. You said, if I don't make it to India, I will never be content. It will always bug me. And then you describe when you arrive as, I strangely felt like I was coming home. Now, you grew up in Edmonds, Washington, and as far as I can tell, India is very different from Edmonds, Washington. So what do you mean when it felt like you were coming home?
I don't know. It was the craziest thing, but I had traveled all that way across so much arid wasteland and desert and nerve-wracking borders and this burned off territory where the only thing on the horizon was a bunch of stones that marked a cemetery or a few rocks that were an old fortress. And now you're coming out of the Khyber Pass across Pakistan, and you've got this lush, densely populated Hindu world, which is so green and so just plush. And I had never been there before, but for some reason I've always dreamed of going there. And when Jean and I walked across that border into India, we really felt like we were coming home. Part of it might have been the British heritage there and the infrastructure they had and the fact that they speak English, and I could read the Time magazine and the Newsweek magazine was all India, but it was the same format as Time and it was in English, which I really appreciated. But there was something about India that just was coming home, and it really was, and I was not disappointed. And I don't know why, but I just love it.
I feel the same way. I feel that everyone has a soul place, like they have a soulmate, that one place that they're meant to be. And for some people, it's India. But India is not easy, okay? It is not easy. It wasn't easy then. It's still not easy. I like to say that if you find any street corner in any Indian city, large or small, turn around in 360 degrees and you will see the best and the worst of humanity. It's all there. Very densely packed. And one thing that frustrates you in India is the time or the lack of time management. They act, quote, as if time has no value. You say, and I love this line, in India, time is like bubble gum, a mix of worthless and forever.
Yeah.
And that is brilliant.
That's a good line.
Yes, it is a good line. But you sort of indicate that India changed your relationship toward time. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, I'm really American in my approach to time. I mean, if you take a Rick Steves tour, the first commandment is punctuality. And we've got a lot to do. We're going to be well organized. And if you're 5 minutes late and there's 20 people on the bus, you just stole 5 times 20, 100 minutes of group time. And we're going to leave you if you do that again. In India, I learned, it occurred to me, we talk about time like it is, like money. Think about the terms. We spend it, we invest it, we waste it, we bank it. Time is valuable. And in India, if time, for whatever reason, I mean, there's a lot of reasons in India it is less valuable, but they almost want to make a point with somebody who comes in there for whom time is money, to put you through the ringer and let you know your time is worthless, just like ours. And that's what's frustrating about it.
And I think if you go there with the attitude that you're going to change India, you're bound to go through a lot of frustration. It's been around thousands of years. They're not going to change. Either you bend or you break. And I lived in Delhi for a few years and I decided to bend.
We both value India and we love traveling in India, but it's one, and I teach wherever I go, I teach about it. It's very frustrating for me to teach about traveling in India or appreciating India. And I would never take a tour around India. Europe is so much more predictable about what people will like and what they're looking for and what you can learn. India is a personal experience, and I wouldn't want to be in charge of somebody's experience in India. Like I love to be in charge of their experience in Ireland or Portugal.
Well, that's interesting, because in the beginning of the journal of your book, you describe Europe as the wading pool, like the kiddie pool for world exploration. Yet after this journey, you don't start Rick Steves Asia, you start Rick Steves Europe. For that reason, because you're so punctual and it would drive you nuts?
No, Europe is my heritage. It's what I studied. It's where I've got connections. And from a business point of view, it's a big market. I can impact and help many more trips by writing a good guide to London or Paris than a guidebook to Kashmir.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. Now, back to the show.
So let's take a step back now. Look, the journey's over and you're heading home. You have accumulated a lot of souvenirs on the road. I tried to keep track of them. A samovar from Iran, a Nepali hat, a Tibetan. I mean, I don't know how you fit all this stuff.
I don't either. When I read that, I don't know where I put I never buy souvenirs now, but I was very into tangible memory pieces, souvenirs.
Do you still have any of them?
I still have all of them.
All of them? Okay.
I got this amazing Gurkha knife. I mean, you could never get it on an airplane now. It must be about 18 inches and it's shaped like a boomerang. And it's got it's in an old leather pouch that I got from a Gurkha soldier, a Nepali soldier. And it is the most beautifully crafted knife.
Okay. Are you a hoarder, Rick? Are you a hoarder? Because you don't seem to subscribe to Marie Kondo's spark of joy, minimalism.
I'm a hoarder in a very strange way because I don't capitalize on it. They're just sitting in boxes. But one thing that's been nagging me is I want to go back into those boxes and find those little knickknacks that I got when I was in India and just kind of be thankful 40 years, 50 years later, I've still got them.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions. I've sort of saved this one for toward the end. It's sort of the elephant in the room. Hash, marijuana. In Afghanistan, you, quote, lose your marijuana virginity. You say that you had actually were turned off by the thought of smoking pot. And amazingly, in Nepal, you write these words: I doubt if I want to smoke a lot of pot in the future. Now, from what I know about you, that's one prophecy that did not come true.
Yeah. When I read that, I thought, well, I wrote that. I thought that. I don't know why I thought it. Because now when I smoke pot, if I have a New Year's resolution, it's usually next year I want to smoke more pot. I never do because I'm just too busy.
Right.
But for me, pot is freedom. If for a writer, pot, for somebody who loves music, somebody who loves food, somebody who loves a lot of other things, pot is freedom. Pot amplifies. Pot is like getting the correct glasses on.
But you're writing there that you don't imagine you'd be smoking. Okay.
I don't know why that was, because I guess, yeah, that's a puzzle to me, I got to say, because honestly, I think if you would try to make me say, when is the happiest you've ever been? It would probably be at Pie. There's a few places, but certainly Pie and Chai. That's the hippie hangout tea shop where they have apple pie coming out of this medieval oven
in Kathmandu, I believe.
In Kathmandu,
Yeah.
and it's where all of the philosophers and hippies and freaks would hang out, for whom time was not money, and they had got over being homesick, and that just is where they spent time together. And to go there and enjoy that apple pie, enjoy the altitude, enjoy the Himalayas all around you, enjoy the doors or the who or the stones, and to be smoking pot with these other kindred spirits.
Was that your happy place on the trail?
With monkeys in the trees looking down at you. God, that was great. Yeah.
I can see you just traveled back in time there to 1978 for a moment, but we're back here.
Yes. Okay. Wake up, Rick.
So they say that memory, and just to wrap up, that how we remember something is not the same as how we experience. And memory is not just hitting the record and then the play button. Memory is a creative act, right? So when you're remembering the trip, you're actually recreating it literally. So do you remember this trip differently? And does it sort of evolve or morph over the years? Does it become better? Do you forget all the discomforts, or do you remember them? I don't know.
It's interesting because in my work, I'm always telling anecdotes about travel, and I draw on a lot of anecdotes from this trip when I'm trying to teach different things, especially in my travel as a political act talk. And there are a few things that I read in this book that, again, was a time capsule for 40 years of a story that I've been telling. And for some reason in my mind, the story has morphed into something essentially the same, but with different details. And I feel bad because I've been telling a story as if it exactly happened that way when my memory changes over time. Because I trust the journal. The journal is exactly what happened because I wrote about it that night. So things change in my memory over time, but the lesson and the essence of it is true to spirit. And I'm just thankful for the book because it affirms some thoughts I have. It reminds me how I've progressed in my thinking in a lot of ways, but it also reminds me of how insightful I was and curious I was as a kid.
Yeah, no, you were. So one of my all-time favorite travel quote is from the writer Henry Miller. He said that one's destination is never a place, but a new way of looking at things. So my question to you, Rick, is what new way of looking at things emerged from this trip on the Hippie Trail?
I think it's a line I use in my writing. Having traveled overland to India, it messed up my confidence, my cultural confidence. It rearranged my cultural furniture. It taught me that I may know music, but I don't know music. I know music in a Western sense with meter and mode. And then you go to India and you realize there is classical music that makes no sense at all to my Western ears, that's just as sophisticated and beautiful, that turns its back on our concept of meter and mode. 2/4 time, cut time, waltz time, 3/4 time, or mode meaning minor or major, just the arrangement of half steps.
So you didn't
steps.
know what you thought you knew.
I thought I knew what music was, and I realized, no, I knew what Western music is. I thought I knew what time was. No, I knew what American time with my work ethic that my parents enforced on me. I thought I knew what love was. India has more joy than America, but it's cumulative joy. It's not per person joy. It's a big, big compost pile of joy with a lot of sorrow.
Joy in a way.
But the gross national joy in India is mind-blowing. And you don't really know that when you look at statistics from the United States or when you support some organization that's helping development in poor countries. You know the humanity of that and the promise of that and the beauty of that when you go there and you sit in the middle of that compost pile of humanity and you try not to get diarrhea. I mean, it's the interesting irony.
We could probably talk for another hour about diarrhea and about.
Yes.
But Gene seemed to get a lot more sick than you did, I have to say.
He really did. He really
seemed
did.
unlucky. Like, oh, Gene's sick again. What's going on with Gene?
I feel bad about that.
And you're still in touch with Gene, right? You're still friends.
I see him all the time. We're collaborating.
And he'll still like you after this book comes out, right?
Yeah. He edited it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So last question. It's the end of your journey. You're in Kathmandu, smoking hash and enjoying yourself, but you're about to go home. The flight leaves the next day. And you're worrying aloud on the page about, and I'm quoting you here, the impossibility of sustaining this wonder. So my question to you is it really impossible to sustain the wonder? And if it is possible, how do we do it once we get home?
Yeah, that is the big challenge, because I was sober about that. I was almost stressed out about it. This is so good. I'm going to go home and I've got to pay the rent, and I've got to, take care of the car, and I've got to, figure out, am I going to be married and have kids or whatever. It just was so selfish, this trip. And I got to go home, and I'm just wondering, and this is what I do with each of my journals, is in that little postscript, I kind of go, okay, where am I at now? And that's what was my concern. I had drunk from this well, and it was a well that I don't even know if I can get back to it again, but I know the result of drinking from this well. And I hoped I could splice that into a more realistic existence, because I don't think that's realistic.
Right. You can't stay on the hippie trail forever.
No, you can't stand. But you can take dimensions of that into your life and be thankful that you got that and weave it in together. And I suppose that's my takeaway. And I've tried to do that. And my good intentions have been intercepted by me finding a niche in my work that has caused me to work more than I probably should, but I love it and I don't regret it, because I found my niche and I enjoy what I do.
So you've sustained the wonder.
Yeah. Well, I also know that we can aspire to that. We can do better, because I've been there.
Amen. The book is on the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu, and the making of a travel writer. It was a real treat, and it was a real pleasure talking to you, Rick, and I hope to see you out there on the trail, hippie or otherwise.
Hey, Eric, I think we're both hippies at heart, and we just have a little more perspective that comes with years. So
there you go.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Take care, Rick.
Happy travels.
Bye-bye.
There you have it. Special thanks once again to Eric and Rick for making this show happen. And thank you, my friend, for spending your time to listen to the episode today. If you liked that conversation, if you enjoyed being a fly on the wall there, I certainly did. You can get more in the feed. We've had Eric on the show a couple times. We've had Rick on the show once before. And so feel free to dive in and follow the podcast and find those episodes. Of course, we have our free newsletter as well over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. And one last reminder, Rick Steves' new book on the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer. And I can recommend any of Eric's books as well, which you can find through those links in the show notes. I'm going to leave you with a quote from each one of these wonderful gentlemen. First, Eric Weiner, who said, quote, "Some places are like family. They annoy us to no end, especially during the holidays, but we keep coming back for more because we know deep in our hearts that our destinies are intertwined." And Rick, I'll leave you with a last quote from him. He said, quote, "Travel is rich with learning opportunities, and the ultimate souvenir is a broader perspective." End quote. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to this show today. And I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.